If you're familiar with the KPU, you already know who Roccat is. While it's been wildly popular among enthusiasts, Roccat has since made plans to refresh this design for a much improved experience with the Kone Pro Air. Or is this just another situation of if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Today, we'll be finding out with our first hands-on of this wireless implementation. Before we get started, it should be noted that Roccat did send this unit out for review, but you should know that all opinions here are my own, and this does not affect my review in any way. Welcome back, everyone. My name's Athey, and this is the Kone Pro Air from Roccat. The packaging includes a plastic protective cover that fills most of the box's space. You're given the wireless USB receiver and the wire, which acts as a charging cable. Surprisingly, a wireless extender is not included with this mouse. Rather unfortunate, considering many other mice in this price range do come with one, even the Model O, which costs significantly less. The sensor here is using Roccat's Owl Eye 19K optical sensor based on the PAW3370. The 3370 has grown to be quite popular in mice, and for good reason. While there technically isn't a DPI button, you do have access to a profiles button at the bottom of the mouse, which you can use to change DPI modes on the fly if needed. I never encountered any issues in any of the games I played, from twitch shooters to tactical shooters, and when testing for CPI deviation in Mouse Tester, I had clean results across the board at 800 DPI, measuring in at a perfect 800 CPI most of the time, accounting for human error, of course. The software gives you access to many options, such as scroll speed, double-click speed, and DPI adjustments, just to name a few. The second tab allows you to remap your mouse buttons as well, including the Profiles button, located at the bottom. The third tab allows you to adjust RGB, and the fourth tab dives into the advanced settings for things like energy saving, angle snapping, polling rate, and LOD adjustment. Finally, at the very bottom, you can change up your profiles for an even further customized experience for whatever setting you plan on using this mouse in. Work, gaming, you name it. Roccat's Swarm software has always looked pretty dated in my opinion, or perhaps just a bit too gamery, if that makes sense. It works fine for what it is, but I feel like if you're someone who's deeply into their software, Swarm is probably due for a redesign at some point. Other than that though, it is what it is, and it works just fine. When it comes to battery life, I never had any issues with the mouse dying on me in the week or so I spent testing this mouse. Battery life is pretty spot on as well. In the time I spent playing with this mouse, I only ever had to charge it once, and it should be noted that Roccat does advertise 100 hours of battery life, though it's unclear as to whether or not this was tested with the mouse at 500 Hz or 1000 Hz, as most companies don't usually disclose this up front. Though typically when I ask company representatives this question, testing claims are always handled at 1000 Hz. So I'd like to assume things as such. Battery life claims can also get pretty tricky with the addition of Bluetooth features in a mouse as well. So all I can really say at the moment is battery life here is strong, and you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Before we get to the buttons, here's a quick sound test. Mouse 1 and Mouse 2 use Roccat's own optical Titan switch, rated for 100 million clicks. There's a small amount of pre-travel and a fair bit of post-travel, but button wobble and side play is also nearly non-existent. While there's slight movement to the side when pushed toward the scroll wheel, there is no movement when pushed outward. Buttons feel mostly locked in place here. My biggest issue with the main clicks, though, is the sound and feel. While I wasn't a huge fan of the Burst Pro clicks, Kone Pro Air clicks just don't feel or sound very nice compared to the Burst Pro clicks. Both mice use Roccat's optical switches, but the implementation here on the Kone Pro Air just doesn't feel very great in my opinion. If you're looking for relatively silent clicks, however, these are great for that. Side buttons here are also large and very usable compared to that of the KPU. The switches used in the side buttons are TTC black shell white dots. Pre-travel is low, while having higher post-travel. The The rounded edges of the side buttons are glossy, while the main surface area of the button is a matte finish. The bottom of the mouse also features a DPI button and a 3-point power switch. While the mouse doesn't have a DPI button, you could technically use the profile button as a replacement for that. The scroll movement here feels soft and subtle while still being defined. The encoder used here appears to be a TTC blue core. Interestingly, the scroll wheel, unlike most mice these days, is using an aluminum wheel, which feels unlike anything I've used in the past. I'd like to call this the new standard for top-tier gaming mice. Really great to see in a product like this. The texture of the scroll wheel itself is slightly chalky in feel with notches. Click feel itself is extremely satisfying when combined with the aluminum scroll, firm and snappy in feedback. Definitely my new favorite scroll wheel in any of the mice that I've tried. The shape here feels absolutely amazing, but considering how odd it would be to describe it, I'll just say this: pincer claw grip is the way for this shape. After having several moments of trying to main the KPU and causing myself some serious finger pains, the Kone Pro Air just feels effortless to use in comparison. My previous issue with the KPU was the designated thumb area on the left side. I tend to grip my mice from the lowest point of the frame, and the sharp fall off of the KPU's left side area would always be in the way, never giving me that full range of movement that I'd expect. The Kone Pro Air, on the other hand, seems to have smoothed out this area, and while I still dislike the idea of limiting your grip area on a mouse with a design like this, things are definitely much improved with the Kone Pro Air, and I'm happy to say that it's a definite upgrade in this regard. While the Kone Pro Air is slightly larger and heavier than the KPU, at least with the wireless option, the transition of jumping between them was not an issue for me at all. The coating of my white version feels very similar, if not exactly like the KPU White Edition, which is awesome, so hopefully you know what to expect in terms of grip. It's a smooth matte coating with solid grip potential for sweaty hands. The sides of the mouse, however, feature a line texture that stretches from the back to the front. I can't really say anything good or bad about them, though I suppose they could help with lifting the mouse. The stock cable for the Kone Pro Air is great, reasonably flexible and not too stiff. A really well-rounded cable, and I personally don't see any reason to swap the cable out with an aftermarket one unless specifically going for aesthetics. Mouse feet here are also pretty great, using Roccat's own heat-treated PTFE. Really solid stuff here, and definitely one of the best stock feet that I've used. The glide felt great across cloth and glass mouse pads, and I don't see any reason to replace these with aftermarket mouse feet. The weight of the mouse here is about 75 grams and around 80 grams of the bit of cable. Pretty solid weight here considering it's wireless and using that aluminum scroll wheel. Build quality here feels pretty solid. No outstanding issues with creak or flex that I could find on my units. The most I can say is that the side buttons occasionally give off a squeaky sounding, springy feedback when pressed and released a certain way. But that's just me really nitpicking at it, as there's nothing else that I could find wrong that affected me or my gameplay. Our last notable release from Roccat was their Burst Pro, and while it wasn't personally a favorite of mine, I was really impressed with it overall, and that definitely applies here, with the slight differences being that this is most definitely one of my new top picks, and while Roccat as a brand wasn't always a high recommendation from me, I could easily recommend trying this shape out. Only if you know what to expect coming from the KPU. It's just barely larger, but I'll be damned if these changes don't make it that much more comfortable. Just please, Roccat, delete the thumb groove. I just wanted to give a quick thank you to everyone that's been hanging in there waiting for me to upload anything. I've been gone for a while, I realized that. My house flooded, there was some complications with family that I was trying to work through regarding health issues, so I appreciate your patience, and thank you guys so much for sticking around. It really means a lot to me. It's still crazy to think that people are sticking around and watching my stuff. 1 view, 2 views, doesn't matter to me. I really appreciate your time. I couldn't express that enough, and I hope that you guys stick around to the end. And let's see how far this channel goes, how long I want to keep doing this. There's a lot of great stuff on the way, and I hope you guys are here along for the ride. And I appreciate your time, I appreciate your patience. I love you guys. See you in the next one.